The summer rain hammered against the windows of the Blackwood mansion like thousands of tiny fists demanding entrance. Richard Blackwood stood in the marble foyer, his expensive suit soaked through, briefcase hanging limply from his hand. The flight from Singapore had been exhausting, but something deeper than jet lag pulled at his consciousness. An inexplicable urgency had driven him to cancel his remaining meetings and return home 3 days early. The mansion felt different tonight. Richard could not quite place what had changed, but the air itself seemed charged with an energy that made his skin prickle. He set down his briefcase and loosened his tie. Walking through the silent halls, where every shadow seemed to hold memories of Catherine. 2 years had passed since the accident, yet her presence lingered in every corner of their home. He poured himself a glass of whiskey in the study, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had haunted him since boarding the plane in Asia. The antique clock on the mantel showed 11:30. Margaret, the housekeeper, would have retired to her cottage on the property hours ago. He was alone in this vast house, just as he had been every night since Catherine died. But then he heard it. A soft splash echoing from somewhere deep within the house. Richard froze, the glass halfway to his lips. The sound came again, unmistakable now. Someone was in the pool, the private indoor pool that had remained covered and unused. Since that terrible night 2 years ago, when Catherine had drowned during a late night swim. His heart began to race as he set down his drink and moved toward the west wing. Each step felt heavier than the last as he approached the pool area, a place he had forbidden anyone to enter. The door stood slightly ajar, warm humidity seeping through the gap. Soft blue light flickered from within, reflecting off the hallway walls. Richard pushed the door open slowly. The pool area was filled with that ethereal, underwater glow he remembered so well. And there, gliding through the water with graceful strokes, was a woman. Her long dark hair fanned out behind her like ink spreading through water. For one heart-stopping moment, Richard thought he was seeing Catherine's ghost. But as the woman surfaced and turned toward the pool's edge, he saw she was younger, perhaps in her mid-20s. With features that were similar to Catherine's but distinctly her own, she moved through the water with an elegance that seemed almost otherworldly, completely unaware of his presence. When she finally reached the shallow end and stood, water cascading down her shoulders, Richard found himself unable to look away. She wore a simple black swimsuit that did nothing to hide her graceful figure. Her movements were deliberate and calm, as though she belonged there, as though she had every right to be swimming in his private pool at midnight. It was this confidence that finally snapped Richard out of his trance. "Who are you?" His voice came out harsher than intended, echoing off the tiled walls. The woman turned without any sign of fear or surprise. Her dark eyes met his with an intensity that made him take an involuntary step backward. She reached for a towel on a nearby chair and wrapped it around herself with unhurried movements. "My name is Sophia Laurent," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I work here. Margaret hired me 3 weeks ago to help with the household duties." Richard felt anger rising in his chest. "Margaret knows this pool is off limits. No one is supposed to be in here." "I know." Sophia stepped closer, her wet feet leaving prints on the marble floor. "I apologize. I could not sleep, and the water called to me. I thought since you were away no one would notice." "The water called to you?" Richard heard the bitterness in his own voice. That is quite poetic for someone trespassing in a forbidden area. Something flickered across Sophia's face. Sadness, perhaps? Or understanding? "You are right to be angry. This place holds painful memories for you. I should not have intruded." The way she spoke with such certainty about his pain made Richard study her more carefully. There was something familiar in her eyes, in the way she held herself. "How long did you say you have been working here?" 3 weeks. "But I have known about this house much longer." Sophia pulled the towel tighter around herself. "I knew your wife, Mr. Blackwood. Catherine was very kind to me once, when I needed help most." The mention of Catherine's name from this stranger's lips felt like a physical blow. Richard gripped the edge of a nearby table to steady himself. "That is impossible. I knew everyone in Catherine's life. Not everyone." Sophia moved closer still, close enough that he could see droplets of water clinging to her eyelashes. 5 years ago, I was homeless and desperate. Catherine found me outside a shelter in the city. She did not just give me money. She gave me hope. She helped me get back on my feet, paid for my education, stayed in touch with me for over a year. She made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, I would find you." Richard felt the room spinning. Catherine had never mentioned helping a young homeless woman. But then again, Catherine had been full of surprises. Always involving herself in causes she kept private, always giving more than she told him about. "If this is true, why'd you wait 2 years to appear?" "Because I was afraid." For the first time, Sophia's composure cracked slightly. Catherine died so suddenly, so mysteriously. The official report said accidental drowning, but she was an excellent swimmer. She taught me to swim in this very pool during one of her visits to my apartment. She was not afraid of water. She loved it. "What are you suggesting?" Richard's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "I am not suggesting anything. I am simply saying that Catherine saved my life, and now I feel I owe it to her memory to be here. When I learned Margaret needed help, I applied immediately. I needed to understand what happened to the woman who gave me everything." Richard studied Sophia's face, searching for signs of deception. But all he saw was sincerity mixed with something else he could not quite identify. Determination, perhaps. Or was it something more dangerous? "This pool," Sophia said quietly, gesturing to the water behind her. "Catherine told me it was her sanctuary. The one place she could think clearly. Did you know she came here almost every night during the last month of her life?" "How could you possibly know that?" "Because she told me. We spoke on the phone several times a week. She said she was working on something important, something that worried her. She would not tell me what, but she made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would come here and make sure you were all right." Richard turned away, unable to bear the intensity of Sophia's gaze any longer. The pain of Catherine's loss, which he had carefully locked away, came flooding back with crushing force. "You need to leave now, and you are not to enter this pool area again. If you do, I will have to let you go. I understand." Sophia gathered her clothes from a chair. "But Mr. Blackwood, before I go, there is something you should know. Catherine loved you deeply, but she was frightened of something in the weeks before she died. She wanted me to tell you that if anything happened, you should look in her private study. She said you would understand." Before Richard could respond, Sophia slipped past him and disappeared into the hallway, leaving only wet footprints and the faint scent of jasmine in her wake. Richard stood alone in the pool area, staring at the calm water that had taken his wife from him, wondering if he had just encountered a messenger from Catherine, or something far more complicated. He walked to the edge of the pool and knelt down, trailing his fingers through the water. It was warm, perfectly maintained by the automatic systems that continued running despite his orders to keep the area closed. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to really remember Catherine swimming here. Her laughter echoing off the walls, her joy in the simple act of moving through water, and now, this mysterious young woman. Sophia had appeared claiming connections to Catherine that he had never known existed. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was too convenient, too suspicious. But another part, the part that still ached with loneliness and unanswered questions, wanted desperately to believe that Catherine had left him this gift. This connection to someone who had known a side of her he had never fully understood. Richard stood and dried his hand on his pants. Tomorrow, he would call Margaret and demand answers. Tomorrow, he would investigate every claim Sophia had made. But tonight, as he walked back through the silent mansion, he could not shake the image of her moving through the water with such grace, or the way her eyes had held both sympathy and secrets. For the first time since Catherine's death, Richard felt something other than grief and emptiness. It was wrong, inappropriate, perhaps even dangerous. But as he climbed the stairs to his bedroom, he could not deny the truth. He wanted to see Sophia again. He needed to understand who she really was and what she knew about Catherine's final days. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows with renewed fury. Richard stood at his bedroom window, looking out over the dark grounds of his estate. Somewhere out there, in the staff quarters, Sophia was probably settling into sleep. He wondered if she was thinking about their encounter, if she felt the same strange pull that now gripped him. He told himself it was simply curiosity, a desperate need to learn more about Catherine. But deep in his heart, Richard knew the truth was more complicated. Sophia had awakened something in him that he thought had died with his wife, something powerful and frightening and impossible to ignore. As thunder rolled across the sky, Richard made a decision. He would not fire Sophia. Instead, he would watch her carefully, learn her secrets, discover why she had really come to his home. And perhaps in the process, he would finally learn the truth about what had happened too. Catherine, on that terrible night 2 years ago, the game had begun. Though Richard did not yet realize he was playing, and in the darkness, Sophia Laurent smiled to herself. Knowing that the first move had gone exactly as planned, the morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Richard had barely slept, his mind replaying the encounter with Sophia over and over. He found himself at the breakfast table earlier than usual, waiting with a mixture of anticipation and dread to see her again. Margaret appeared with his coffee, her weathered face creased with concern. "Mr. Blackwood, I did not expect you back so soon. Is everything all right with the business?" "Everything is fine, Margaret." Richard accepted the coffee, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "I need to ask you about the new staff member, Sophia Laurent." Margaret's expression shifted subtly, something guarded entering her eyes. "She came highly recommended. Her references were impeccable." "Is there a problem?" "That depends." "What exactly did she tell you when she applied for the position?" The housekeeper settled into the chair across from him. A rare break in protocol that told Richard this conversation was important. She said she was looking for work, that she had experience in estate management. But there was something else, Mr. Blackwood. She knew things about this house that she should not have known. Details about Mrs. Catherine's routines, her favorite flowers, the way she took her tea. At first I thought perhaps she had researched the family, but it felt more personal than that. She claims Catherine helped her years ago, that they were close. Margaret nodded slowly. That would explain it. Mrs. Catherine had many private charities, many people she helped without telling anyone. She believed kindness was most meaningful when it was done quietly. The older woman paused, her eyes misting slightly. "There is something you should know, sir. In the weeks before Mrs. Catherine died, she seemed troubled. She spent hours in her private study, locked away with papers and her laptop. When I asked if everything was all right, she simply smiled and said she was working on something important." Richard set down his cup with more force than intended. "Why did you never mention this before?" "Because you were grieving, sir. And because I did not want to add to your pain with speculation. But now that this girl has appeared, claiming Catherine sent her, perhaps it is time you looked at what your wife left behind." Before Richard could respond, Sophia entered the breakfast room. She wore simple staff clothing, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. But there was no mistaking the quiet confidence in her movements. Her eyes met Richard's briefly before she lowered them respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood. Margaret, I apologize for disturbing you. I was just checking if you needed anything prepared for lunch, Sophia." Richard heard himself say, his voice steadier than he felt, "Join us, please." Margaret stood quickly. "Sir, I do not think that is appropriate. I will decide what is appropriate in my own home." Richard gestured to the empty chair. "Sit down, Sophia. We need to talk." Sophia moved gracefully to the chair, settling into it with the same calm composure she had shown the previous night. Margaret excused herself reluctantly, leaving them alone in the sun-filled room. "Tell me everything," Richard said. "How you met Catherine, what she told you about her life, about this house. I want the complete truth." Sophia folded her hands on the table, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. "I met Catherine 5 years ago outside a women's shelter in the city. I had been on the streets for 6 months after escaping an abusive relationship. I had no family, no money, no hope. Catherine was volunteering at the shelter that day. She saw something in me that I could not see in myself." Her voice remained steady, but Richard could hear the emotion underneath. "She did not just offer me a bed for the night or a hot meal. She sat with me for hours, listening to my story. Then she made me a promise. She said if I was willing to work hard and rebuild my life, she would help me. And she kept that promise." "What kind of help did she provide?" "Everything. She paid for my counseling, helped me find a small apartment, covered my tuition when I enrolled in business courses. But more than the money, She gave me her time. We spoke on the phone several times a week. She became like the mother I never had. Sophia's voice cracked slightly. And then one night, about 3 weeks before she died, she called me. She sounded frightened, Mr. Blackwood. She said she had discovered something terrible, something that involved people close to you both. Richard felt his blood run cold. What did she discover? She would not tell me the details over the phone. She said it was too dangerous. She only said that if anything happened to her, I should come here and find her hidden files. She said you would need help understanding what she had found, that you would need someone you could trust. Sophia leaned forward, urgency in her voice. She was planning to tell you everything, but she wanted to gather all the proof first. She did not want to make accusations without evidence. And you think her death was not an accident? I know it was not an accident. Sophia's certainty was absolute. Catherine was an excellent swimmer. She taught competitive swimming in college. The idea that she would simply drown in her own pool makes no sense, unless someone wanted it to look like an accident. Richard stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the grounds of his estate stretched endlessly, meticulously maintained gardens giving way to woods in the distance. It all looked so peaceful, so normal. But Sophia's words were unraveling everything he thought he knew about Catherine's death. Do you know where these hidden files are? Catherine told me to look in her private study, behind the painting of the ocean. She said there was a safe you did not know about. Richard turned back to face her. That is impossible. I know every inch of this house. Perhaps you knew every inch that Catherine wanted you to know. Sophia stood as well, moving closer to him. She loved you, Mr. Blackwood. Everything she did was to protect you. But she also knew that sometimes protection means keeping secrets until the right moment to reveal them. The intensity of Sophia's gaze made Richard's heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the conversation about Catherine. He found himself noticing the curve of her neck, the way the morning light caught in her dark hair. It was wrong to feel this attraction, this pull toward a woman who had appeared so mysteriously in his life. Yet he could not deny it. Show me, he said finally. Show me where this safe is supposed to be. They walked together through the mansion's corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Richard had avoided Catherine's private study since her death, unable to face the room where she had spent so many hours working on her charitable projects. Now, as Sophia pushed open the door, he was struck by how perfectly preserved everything was. Margaret had clearly kept the room exactly as Catherine had left it. The painting of the ocean hung on the far wall, beautiful seascape Catherine had purchased during their honeymoon in Greece. It depicted waves crashing against ancient rocks, eternal and powerful. Sophia walked directly to it, running her fingers along the ornate frame. Help me take it down, she said. Together they lifted the heavy painting from the wall. Behind it, exactly as Sophia had described, was a small wall safe that Richard had never known existed. His hands trembled as he stared at it, feeling as though his entire understanding of his marriage was crumbling.
Oh.
Do you know the combination? He asked. Sophia shook her head. Catherine said you would figure it out. She said it would be something only you would know, something meaningful to both of you. Richard stared at the safe's digital keypad, his mind racing through possibilities. Their wedding anniversary? Catherine's birthday? He tried both with no success. Then an idea struck him. The coordinates of the spot where he had proposed to her, on a beach in Thailand. He had the numbers tattooed on his ribcage, hidden where no one could see. Catherine had thought it was ridiculously romantic. With shaking fingers, he entered the numbers. The safe beeped once, and the door swung open. Inside were several manila folders, a USB drive, and a sealed letter with Richard's name written in Catherine's distinctive handwriting. He reached for the letter with trembling hands, but Sophia gently stopped him. Perhaps you should read that alone, she said softly. I will wait outside. But Richard found he did not want her to leave. Her presence, strange as it was, felt like a connection to Catherine. Stay, he said. If Catherine trusted you with this secret, then I should trust you too. He broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Catherine's handwriting blurred as tears filled his eyes, but he forced himself to read. My dearest Richard, if you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I am so sorry, my love, for keeping secrets from you. I only wanted to protect you from the darkness I discovered 6 months ago. I learned something terrible about Vincent Crane. Our friend, your business partner, the man we trusted completely, is not who we thought he was. He is involved in financial crimes that have destroyed countless lives. Money laundering, fraud, embezzlement from charitable foundations, including some of my own projects. I began investigating when I noticed irregularities in the foundation accounts. The deeper I dug, the worse it became. Vincent has been using our social connections, our good name, to run his schemes. He has powerful people protecting him, people who will do anything to keep their secrets buried. I gathered evidence. Everything you will need to bring him to justice. It is all on the USB drive in this safe. But Richard, you must be careful. Vincent discovered I was investigating him. He threatened me. He said if I told anyone, especially you, there would be consequences. I am not afraid for myself, but I am terrified for you. Please, my love, take this evidence to the authorities. Do not confront Vincent directly. He is more dangerous than you know. Sophia Laurent is someone I trust completely. I helped her when she had nothing, and she has proven herself worthy of that trust. She knows parts of this story, and she will help you navigate what comes next. Let her in, Richard. Let someone help you carry this burden. I love you more than words can express. If something happens to me, please know that every moment we shared was precious. Do not let grief destroy you. Live, my darling. Find happiness again. That is all I want for you. Forever yours. Catherine. Richard's hands shook so violently that he nearly dropped the letter. Sophia caught it gently, setting it aside before guiding him to a chair. He sat heavily, his mind reeling from the revelations. Vincent Crane, his best friend since college. The man who had stood beside him at his wedding, who had held him when he sobbed at Catherine's funeral. A criminal. A possible murderer. I need to see the evidence, Richard said, his voice hollow. Sophia retrieved the USB drive from the safe and connected it to Catherine's laptop, which still sat on her desk. The screen flickered to life, and folders appeared, each one labeled with dates and names. Financial records, email exchanges, recorded phone conversations, testimony from victims. Catherine had been thorough, building an ironclad case against Vincent and his associates. As Richard scrolled through the files, a horrifying picture emerged. Vincent had been embezzling from charitable organizations for over a decade, using Richard's company as a front for money laundering. He had ruined families, stolen from people who could least afford it, and used his charm and connections to stay above suspicion. There is more, Sophia said quietly, opening another folder. Catherine discovered that Vincent knew she was investigating him. Look at these emails. Richard read the exchanges between Vincent and an unknown contact, discussing Catherine as a problem that needed to be handled. The final email, dated 2 days before Catherine's death, made his blood run cold. She will not stop digging. We need a permanent solution. Make it look natural. Killed her, Richard whispered. Vincent murdered Catherine. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder, and he realized he was shaking. We do not have direct proof of that. The emails are suggestive, but not conclusive. However, Catherine documented everything she learned. If we take this to the right people, they can investigate properly. Richard looked up at Sophia, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. She was not just a beautiful young woman who had mysteriously entered his life. She was Catherine's final gift to him, a trusted ally in the fight for justice. Why did you really come here? He asked. You could have taken this evidence to the police yourself? Why risk working in this house, getting close to me? Sophia's expression softened. Because Catherine asked me to watch over you. Because I owed her everything. And because, she hesitated, then continued, because I needed to be sure you were not involved. I needed to know you were truly the good man Catherine believed you were. And now? Now I know she was right about you. Sophia's hand was still on his shoulder, warm and steady. And I know we need to be very careful. If Vincent suspects you have this evidence, you will be in danger. As if summoning him by speaking his name, Richard's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Vincent. Just heard you were back from Singapore early. Let us have dinner tonight at the club. We need to discuss the Morrison project. It is urgent. Richard showed the message to Sophia. What should I do? Act normal, she said immediately. Do not let him suspect anything has changed. Go to dinner. Behave as you always have. Meanwhile, I will contact Detective James Morrison. Catherine mentioned him in her notes. She trusted him. Morrison was the detective who investigated Catherine's death. He ruled it an accident, because he did not have all the information. But according to Catherine's notes, he had doubts about the official conclusion. He kept the case file open. He will listen. Richard stood, a new determination filling him. We do this carefully. We do this right. For Catherine? Sophia nodded, but there was something else in her eyes now. Something that made Richard's pulse quicken despite the gravity of their situation. They stood close together in Catherine's study, surrounded by the evidence of her final investigation, bound together by shared purpose and grief. Richard, Sophia said softly, using his first name for the first time, there is something else you should know. Catherine told me that if you and I ever met, if we worked together on this, we might develop feelings for each other. She said it was all right. She said she would want you to find someone who could understand what you had been through. The confession hung in the air between them. Richard knew he should step back, maintain professional distance, focus solely on bringing Vincent to justice, but he found himself moving closer instead, drawn by something he could not name. It is too soon, he said, though he was not sure who he was trying to convince. I know. Sophia did not move away. But Catherine was rarely wrong about people. Before either could act on the tension crackling between them, Richard's phone rang. It was Margaret, her voice urgent. Mr. Blackwood, Vincent Crane just arrived at the house unannounced. He is waiting for you in the main parlor. He says, it cannot wait until dinner. Richard and Sophia exchanged alarmed glances. I am coming, Richard said, ending the call. Be careful, Sophia warned. Do not let him know anything has changed. Richard nodded, squaring his shoulders. As he left the study, he glanced back to see Sophia quickly securing the evidence, her movements efficient and purposeful. She was remarkable, he realized. Strong and capable in ways that reminded him of Catherine, yet uniquely herself. He descended the grand staircase to find Vincent waiting in the parlor, his tall frame silhouetted against the windows. His old friend turned with a smile that now seemed sinister in light of what Richard had just learned. Richard, my friend. You look terrible. Jet lag? Something like that. Richard accepted Vincent's handshake, trying not to think about the emails he had just read. What brings you by so urgently? Vincent's smile faded, his expression becoming serious. I have been hearing things, Richard. Concerning things. Someone has been asking questions about our business dealings, digging into old financial records. I wanted to warn you before this became a problem. Richard felt his heart hammering, but kept his face neutral. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests someone is looking for irregularities. I thought you should know in case any authorities contact you. We need to present a united front. Vincent moved closer, his eyes searching Richard's face. You trust me, do you not, old friend? Of course, Richard lied smoothly. We have been through everything together, including Catherine's death. Vincent's tone was sympathetic, but something flickered in his eyes. I know how hard that was for you. How hard it still is. You would tell me if anything strange was happening, would you not? If anyone was asking questions about Catherine. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Richard forced himself to meet Vincent's gaze steadily. Nothing strange is happening. I am just trying to move forward with my life. Vincent seemed to relax slightly. Good. Good. I worry about you, Richard. You have isolated yourself too much since Catherine died. In fact, I heard you hired some new staff. Margaret mentioned a young woman. That is a positive sign. Mention of Sophia made Richard's blood run cold. Just household help. Nothing significant. Still, it is good you are allowing new people into your life. Vincent clapped him on the shoulder. I should go. But remember, Richard, we are in this together. Always have been, always will be. Whatever comes our way, we face it as partners. After Vincent left, Richard stood alone in the parlor, his hands clenched into fists. The casual threat had been clear. Vincent was watching him, suspicious already. They would need to move quickly. Sophia appeared in the doorway. I heard everything through the intercom system. He knows something is wrong. Then we accelerate our timeline. Contact Detective Morrison now. Tonight, we give him everything. As Sophia hurried to make the call, Richard looked out the window at Vincent's car disappearing down the long driveway. His old friend had killed Catherine. Of that, he was now certain. And if Vincent discovered what they were planning, Richard and Sophia would be next. The game had entered a dangerous new phase. And this time, Richard was determined to win, no matter the cost. Detective James Morrison arrived at the Blackwood mansion under cover of darkness. His unmarked car pulling up to a side entrance where Sophia waited to let him in. The detective was a tall man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and the weathered face of someone who had seen too much of humanity's dark side. Richard met them in Catherine's study, where all the evidence remained spread across her desk. Morrison spent 2 hours reviewing everything in silence, his expression growing grimmer with each document he examined. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a mixture of anger and vindication. "I knew something was wrong with Catherine's death," he said, his voice rough. "The scene was too clean, too perfect. But I had no evidence, no grounds to continue investigating. The coroner ruled it accidental drowning, and without proof of foul play, my hands were tied." He tapped the files in front of him. "This changes everything. Can you arrest Vincent Crane?" Richard asked, leaning forward intently. "Not yet. This evidence is damning for financial crimes, but the connection to Catherine's murder is circumstantial. We need more. We need Vincent to incriminate himself." "You said Catherine was planning to record a confrontation with Crane before she died?" Sophia nodded. "She told me she was going to wire herself, get him to admit what he had done. But she died before she could do it. Then we need to finish what she started." Morrison looked at Richard. "You are going to wear a wire when you meet with Vincent. We will be listening nearby. Get him talking about Catherine, about the foundation finances, about anything that might make him slip up and reveal his involvement in her death." Richard felt fear and determination warring within him. "If he suspects, if he realizes what I am doing, he will not hesitate to have me killed too. That is why I will have backup positioned throughout your property. The moment we have what we need, we move in." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "I understand the risk, Mr. Blackwood, but this may be our only chance to get justice for your wife." The plan was set in motion. Richard invited Vincent for dinner at the mansion the following evening, claiming he wanted to discuss dissolving their partnership. It was enough of a bombshell to guarantee Vincent would come. Curious and likely concerned about what Richard might know, as the hours until the meeting ticked away, Richard found himself spending more time with Sophia. They reviewed the plan repeatedly, but gradually their conversations drifted to other topics. She told him more about her life before Catherine rescued her, about the dreams she had abandoned and was now slowly rebuilding. He talked about his marriage, about the man he had been before grief consumed him. "Catherine used to say, 'I work too much,'" Richard admitted as they sat together in the garden, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. "She wanted me to slow down, to appreciate the moments, instead of always chasing the next achievement. I wish I had listened." "You loved her," Sophia said simply. "That is what matters. And she knew it. Did she ever talk about me? When you spoke with her?" Sophia smiled gently. "All the time. She said you were the most honorable man she had ever known. That your strength came not from power or wealth, but from integrity. She was proud of you, Richard. So proud, the words broke something open in Richard's chest. He had not wept since Catherine's funeral, had locked his grief away in a place where it could not reach him. But now, sitting beside Sophia in the garden Catherine had loved, tears finally came. Sophia held him, saying nothing, simply offering the comfort of her presence. When he had regained his composure, Richard found himself looking at Sophia with new eyes. "I think I understand why Catherine brought you into my life. Because she knew I would need someone who understood loss. Someone strong enough to help me face the truth, but gentle enough to help me heal." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Someone like you." Sophia's breath caught. "Richard, we should not do this. Not now. Not while everything is so complicated. I know, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. It is not just gratitude or shared grief. It is something more." "I feel it too," she admitted quietly. "From the moment I saw you standing by the pool, I felt a connection I cannot explain. But I am afraid. Afraid that we are both just seeking comfort in the darkness. Afraid that when this is over, When justice is served, these feelings will fade.
Oh.
Then we take it slowly. We see where this goes. But Sophia, I do not want to lose you when this is finished. Promise me you will stay, regardless of what happens tomorrow night. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I promise. They sat together until sunset, holding hands like teenagers afraid of their first kiss. Bound by circumstances neither had chosen, but both were determined to survive. The next evening arrived too quickly. Detective Morrison and his team set up equipment in hidden locations throughout the mansion. Richard was fitted with a wire so sophisticated it was virtually undetectable. He dressed in casual clothes, trying to appear relaxed despite the tension coiling in his stomach. Sophia helped him with his tie, her fingers trembling slightly. Remember, stay calm, act natural. Let him do most of the talking. I know the plan. Richard caught her hands, holding them still. But if something goes wrong, I need you to get out of here. Promise me, I am not leaving you, Sophia. Please, no. Her voice was firm. We are in this together. That is what Catherine wanted. That is what I want. Ah! Before he could argue further, the doorbell chimed. Vincent had arrived. Richard walked to the main parlor, his heart pounding. Vincent entered with his usual confidence, carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing a smile that no longer fooled Richard. Richard, thank you for having me. When you mentioned dissolving our partnership, I have to admit, I was concerned. We have built something remarkable together. Sit down, Vincent. We need to talk. They settled into the leather chairs that had witnessed countless business discussions over the years. Richard poured wine with steady hands, buying time to gather his thoughts. I have been going through Catherine's things, Richard began, following the script Morrison had helped him prepare. I found some of her work on the foundation finances. There are irregularities I do not understand. Large transfers. Missing funds. I was hoping you could explain them to me. Vincent's smile did not waver, but something shifted in his eyes. Catherine was always meticulous about the foundation. I am sure any irregularities are just accounting errors. These are not accounting errors, Vincent. These are systematic diversions of charitable funds. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years. Richard leaned forward. Catherine knew about this. She documented everything. And I think she confronted you about it before she died. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken threats. Vincent set down his wineglass with careful precision. Be very careful what you are suggesting, Richard. I am not suggesting anything. I am stating facts. Catherine discovered your fraud, and 2 days later, she drowned in our pool. A pool where she swam almost daily for years without incident. Vincent stood, his affable mask finally cracking. You have no idea what you are getting into. Catherine should have left well enough alone. She should have minded her own business. So you admit it. Richard stood as well, his voice rising. You admit you were embezzling from the foundation. I admit nothing. But I will tell you this, old friend. The people I work with, the connections I have, they do not tolerate interference. Catherine learned that lesson. If you continue down this path, you will learn it too. Is that a threat? Vincent moved closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. It is a promise. I did not build my empire to have it destroyed by a grieving widow playing detective. Catherine was a problem. I solved that problem. If you become a problem, Richard, I will solve you too. The confession hung in the air between them. Richard felt a surge of triumph mixed with horror. Morrison had what he needed. You killed her, Richard said, his voice shaking with rage. You murdered Catherine in her own home. I did what was necessary. Vincent's composure was completely gone now, his true nature finally revealed. She was going to ruin everything. Going to the police? Gathering evidence? I tried to reason with her, but she would not listen. So yes, I came to your house that night. I found her swimming alone. It was surprisingly easy. A moment of surprise, holding her under until she stopped struggling. She did not even have time to scream. The casual description of Catherine's murder broke the last of Richard's control. He lunged at Vincent, years of grief and rage exploding into violence. They crashed into the furniture, fists flying. The sophisticated veneer of wealth and civility shattered completely. Then the doors burst open. Detective Morrison and his team flooded into the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Vincent was pulled away from Richard and slammed to the floor, handcuffs snapping around his wrists. "Vincent Crane, you are under arrest for the murder of Catherine Blackwood and multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent." As Morrison read Vincent his rights, the criminal businessman finally seemed to realize the trap he had walked into. His eyes found Richard, filled with hatred and disbelief. "You wore a wire. You betrayed me." "No," Richard said, wiping blood from his lip. "You betrayed yourself. You betrayed our friendship. You betrayed Catherine's trust. And you betrayed every person you ever claimed to help. I just made sure the truth finally came out." As officers led Vincent away, Sophia appeared in the doorway. She ran to Richard, checking him for injuries, her hands gentle but shaking. "Is it over?" she asked. "It is over," Morrison confirmed. "We have everything we need. His confession, the financial records, all of it. Vincent Crane will spend the rest of his life in prison." The next weeks passed in a blur of depositions, interviews, and media attention. The story of Catherine Blackwood's murder and the extensive fraud scheme made national headlines. Other victims came forward, and the investigation expanded to include Vincent's associates. Justice, so long delayed, was finally being served. Through it all, Richard and Sophia remained close. What had begun as a shared mission for justice gradually transformed into something deeper. They took long walks through the estate grounds, talking for hours about everything and nothing. They cooked dinner together in the vast mansion kitchen, laughing at their mistakes. They sat by the pool, where their story had begun. No longer haunted by ghosts, but healing together. 3 months after Vincent's arrest, Richard stood once again at the edge of the indoor pool. But this time, he was not alone. Sophia stood beside him, her hand in his. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. "I am ready." Together, they entered the water. It was warm and welcoming, no longer a place of death, but of renewal. They swam side by side, and Richard felt the last chains of grief loosening their hold on his heart. When they surfaced, laughing and breathless, Sophia pulled him close. "Catherine would be happy to see you like this." "To see you living again. She brought you to me," Richard said, cupping her face in his hands. "Even in death, she was taking care of me. Taking care of us both. You think we would have found each other without her?" "I do not know, but I am grateful we did." Richard kissed her then, a gentle kiss full of promise and hope. When they pulled apart, Sophia was smiling. "So what happens now?" "Now we live. We honor Catherine's memory by building something beautiful from the ashes she left behind. The foundation will be rebuilt properly. The people Vincent hurt will be compensated. And you and I," he paused, his heart full of certainty, "we will figure out our future together. One day at a time." They swam until the sun set, filling the pool area with golden light. Later, as they dried off and prepared to return to the main house, Richard noticed something that made him stop. There, on Catherine's favorite chair, was a jasmine flower that had not been there when they arrived. Sophia saw it too. They exchanged wondering glances, unable to explain its presence. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps Margaret had left it. Or perhaps in some way neither could fully understand. Catherine was letting them know she approved. Richard picked up the flower, inhaling its sweet scent. "Thank you," he whispered to the memory of his late wife. "For everything. For Sophia. For the truth. For giving me permission to be happy again." As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Richard felt at peace for the first time in 2 years. The journey had been painful, the revelations devastating. But he had emerged on the other side stronger and no longer alone. Vincent Crane would spend decades in prison. Justice served for Catherine and all his victims. The Blackwood Foundation would be restored and expanded, helping people the way Catherine had always dreamed. And Richard had found love again, not as a replacement for what he had lost, but as a new chapter in a life that suddenly held infinite possibility. That night, as he and Sophia sat together in the study, where they had first uncovered the truth, Richard pulled out the letter Catherine had left him. He read it again, this time understanding fully what his late wife had known and planned. She orchestrated all of this, he said in wonder. She knew if she could not survive to expose Vincent, she had to create a situation where someone else could. She trained you, trusted you, positioned you to be exactly where I would need you when the time came. She loved you that much, Sophia agreed. And she loved me enough to give me purpose and a future. She saved us both, Richard, before and after her death. Then we will make sure her sacrifice meant something. We will live the kind of lives she would be proud of. Together. Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder. Together. Outside, the moon rose over the Blackwood estate, casting silver light across the grounds. Inside, two wounded souls who had found each other in the darkness began to heal, bound together by tragedy, but choosing to move forward into hope. Catherine's plan had worked perfectly. She had given them justice, truth, and most importantly, each other. And as Richard held Sophia close, he silently thanked his late wife one final time for the greatest gift of all. The chance to love again. The story that had begun with a forbidden swim in a haunted pool ended with two people brave enough to dive into the uncertain waters of a new beginning. And this time, neither of them was swimming alone.